When everyone is in kindergarten, they have you write down what you want to be when you grow up. You know, what most people put astronaut, veterinary, and police officer. I wanted to be a taxidermist.
Welcome to the Hunt Backcountry Podcast, presented by Exo Mountain Gear. This podcast and the gear that we produce at Exo Mountain Gear share the same purpose: to make you a more capable, confident, and successful backcountry hunter. Straight to the point, no fluff, and no BS. This show is all about providing you with valuable information from experienced hunters. To learn more about the podcast or about our backcountry hunting packs, please visit exomountaingear.com. Well, welcome to episode 88. This show is all about taxidermy. So you hunt hard, you score, you find success on a great buck, a great bull, whatever the animal is. It's something that you want to keep and cherish and preserve. Our guest tonight's going to help you learn how to do that as best you can. Casey Higley is the owner and taxidermist at Wild River Taxidermy. In this show, he shares his decades of knowledge with us. He's not only a taxidermist, he himself is a backcountry hunter who has hunted not only throughout the West, but all over the world. Casey helps us understand the caping process, cape care in the field, packing the cape, and so much more in terms of what we need to do before we get to the taxidermist to make our taxidermist happy and to enable him to get us the best end result as possible. We also talk about not only field care and the field processing, but we talk about how you can work with your taxidermist to make your vision become a reality. We get into some specific topics such as caring for velvet, which is sure to apply to you early season guys hunting here in the next couple weeks. No matter what type of hunting you do, taxidermy is probably in your future, and it's helpful in this episode to hear about what's possible and what we as hunters can do to ensure that we can get the best mount possible. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. It's packed with helpful information. Before we dive in with Casey, I want to thank Corey Hoffman for his review in iTunes. Corey, please email us your shipping information and we will get some Exo Mountain Gear swag headed your way. Speaking of swag, guys, we now have Hunt Backcountry Podcast stickers and shirts soon coming. They're not quite ready to order yet, but they're coming soon. So be sure to stay tuned for future episodes and we will let you know how you can get that gear and represent the Hunt Backcountry Podcast if you're interested. All right, let's get into this show with Casey Higley from Wild River Taxidermy. All right, Casey, welcome to the Hunt Backcountry Podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, we're excited. We kind of posted on social media saying that we wanted to get a taxidermist on the show and really looking for recommendations. And we had, dozens and dozens and dozens of recommendations. It was cool to see your name pop up a few times. So glad we could make this work and get you on.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So I guess just to get started, why don't you, just so our listeners have some context, go ahead and give us some background and kind of talk about your background as a hunter and a taxidermist, maybe a bit about how you got into it.
Okay, well, taxidermy backstory, it's kind of funny. When everyone is in kindergarten, they have you write down what you want to be when you grow up. You know, what most people put astronaut, veterinary, and police officer. I wanted to be a taxidermist.
Is that for real?
That's 100% for real. My father's a taxidermist. I've been in the shop as long as I could remember. In my dad's shop when I was a kid, my dad's shop was like 10 miles from our house, but I was always with him from the age of probably 3 or 4 years on. But I didn't start taxidermy until I was 9 years old. I started working on little birds and things like that. I mounted my first half life-size raccoon at the age of 10. Started my own business with my own business name at the age of 16. And then I was part-time until I was 30. I'm 35 now. I've been full-time for 5 years now. Run a full-time shop here in southeast Idaho, the little town of Malad.
That's awesome. And you hunt as well, right?
Yes. Now, about my hunting, I try to hunt at least 2 to 3 states a year, and I've been all over. I've hunted Alaska, Nebraska, of course, Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, Montana. This year I've got a Montana whitetail tag, archery elk tag here in Idaho. Archery antelope tag starts the 15th here in Idaho. And then I've got just my general deer tag here in Idaho. But I've also hunted overseas. I've been to Kyrgyzstan. I hunted ibex in 2015 in Kyrgyzstan. Yeah, it's pretty much my passion. That's all my wife and I and our kids do. We hunt and fish. It's what we do.
That is awesome. Yeah, that was, it was something I was sort of assuming when I was considering taxidermists to get on the show. I was kind of assuming that they hunted, but it wasn't until I started to look into some guys that realizing that they don't actually hunt. They just do the taxidermy. And being hunters, we weren't trying to be biased by any means, but at the same time, we wanted to talk to somebody who has in the field experience, because that's really what we want to get at tonight. So it's cool to hear that you do both.
Yes, one of my best friends is a taxidermist. He's been on like 3 or 4 hunts his entire life, and they've all been guided. So yeah, completely different, where I'm over the counter DIY 99% of my hunts. I've only been on 2 guided hunts in my life, one in Kyrgyzstan and one in Alaska. The one in Alaska, the guide, he didn't help out at all. We took care of everything.
Yeah, awesome. It's cool. You're one of us. That's cool to hear. And we have, man, so much I want to cover, but let's go ahead and start here chronologically. Let's talk about pre-hunt, and specifically, again, talking for us, just hunters out there. We're clearly not taxidermists. I want to talk about things that we need to pack with us into the backcountry to best care for a cape, to best, care for what's going to become, hopefully, a trophy mount at our taxidermist. So any tools that come to mind, whether that's a knife or other tools, any advice on sort of pre-hunt things that we need to make sure we have with us in the field?
Yeah, I'll make a short list for you. Clean game bags, the sharpest knife you can possibly have. I know a lot of guys run those Havalons. I run blades like the Havalon, but I just use a regular scalpel handle because that's what I use every day in my shop. But those Havalon knives are great because they're so sharp. A sharp knife is critical for not messing up the cape. So I would give the list of good clean game bags, a sharp knife, a little flathead screwdriver, and then knowledge of how to cape it out. And you can find diagrams on the internet all over. I send them to my clients all the time. I have no problem sending them to you guys. A diagram of how to cape it out so you don't cut the brisket too short. You don't cut up into the armpits. There's all sorts of no-nos that the taxidermist is going to not be happy with and have to fix later on if you guys do that part wrong.
Yeah, and we're certainly going to get into that. So it's interesting to hear how simple that list is. I was hoping it wasn't going to be, a bunch of additions that we needed to make to our pack.
Nope, it's not at all.
Yeah, and you find that the Havalon style or the equivalents like Outdoor Edge and Gerber and many other companies make those style of knives these days. That's enough in terms of what we need to get it caped out.
Oh yeah, definitely. I use, like I said, just an aluminum handle. Mine cost $8. I buy them from Cincinnati Surgical's the company I buy from, and I buy my blades by 500. But I've got like 15 handles. Every backpack's got them. Every vehicle has them. So when we're hunting, there's always a handle and there's always blades. That's what we use to I process my whole deer with them.
Yeah.
Out in the field.
Perfect. Okay. Awesome. Well, that was short and sweet and exactly what I was hoping to hear, that we didn't have to add a bunch of stuff that we weren't already carrying. So let's keep going. And I mean, you mentioned it. So much of, I think, what we can do wrong is knowledge and is technique. And so I would love to begin to dive in there. We can get more specific later as it applies to certain species and things like that. But let's talk in generalities right now. For kind of, your classic shoulder mount on big game, whether it be deer or elk for most guys. So animals down, now what? Like I think so many times many hunters are focused on the meat, which is a great thing, but are there certain things before we even get busy trying to cool down meat, maybe in warm weather, that we need to take in consideration if we're also going to be doing a mount? Like, games down, games recovered, where do we start? What should we do?
Okay, number one thing, you don't need to slit the throat. You know what I mean? You've shot the animal, it's bled itself out. You don't have to split. It's surprising. Most people think, well, that's the thing from the 70s. I still probably, out of 250 to 300 game heads I get in a year, probably 30 of them have a slit throat. So it still happens often. Don't slit the throat, and then don't cut all the way up the brisket with your saw into the, when you go to gut it, first thing, priority, you want to gut it, you want to get it cooled down just like any other animal. Just if you weren't going to mount it, don't slit the throat. You slit, you get it gutted, you reach out the end to cut the esophagus, and you get it gutted so you get it cooled down there. And then you can start working on breaking the animal down and getting the cape off all at the same time. I do it both at the same time. Do you want me to go over how I do that?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, what you do is you start at the base, right at the base of the skull, where it drops down into the backbone, into the neck, and you cut always down with the grain of the hair. Never go up and never use a sawing motion. That's where the sharp knife comes into play. Go as straight as you can, perfectly down the backbone, and I go all the way to the tail because I'm going to be taking the front quarter, the hind quarter, everything off at the same time. So we'll go deer, elk, everything. If you're going to break it down, you're going to quarter it up. We'll do the cape all at once. What you're going to do is you go all the way down to the tail. And then you're going to take and you're going to cut that animal in half when you're looking at it. So you got your front leg, your back leg, and you're going to go, okay, here's the middle of that. And then you're going to go from the back all the way around to where you gutted it, and then all the way around where you gutted it on the other side. So you've got those. And then you go to the knee of the animal. You ring around the knee, and then you go straight up the back of the hairline. There's short hair, long hair that you can see. It's pretty basic. You can see it, on all animals. And you go straight from there all the way back to your gut line. And you cut there, and then you can start peeling it off. Number one thing, guys they're always saying, I want to keep the meat clean. That's priority. And they bring me a cape, say an elk cape, and it's got 25 pounds of meat on it. Well, that 25 pounds of neck meat was all your neck roast that you left on the cape. So you weren't keeping your meat as a priority. Try to skin clean. Try to keep no meat on the cape. Keep the meat on your animal because in turn you have more meat. And then if you have lots of thick, fat pieces of meat on your cape, that heat stays between the skin and the meat and it'll spoil your cape.
So it's just a matter of trying to, maybe once you have that cape loosened and you've already tried to keep as much off, maybe going back over that cape and trying to move any larger chunks of fat or flesh or what have you.
Yeah, definitely do that. When I cape them in the field and I cape them here when guys see it, it blows them away. I don't have to flesh them at all afterwards. I can literally skin it without getting any meat on it. Because as you skin, you can mainly just pull it. As you know, when you pull off a hind quarter or you pull off a front shoulder, you pull the skin off, the meat doesn't come with it. Guys, they worry about with the neck, they've got to skin it. You don't have to skin it. You can pull it just like you do on a hind quarter or pulling a deer hide completely off a deer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've noticed too that the more, like if you are having to make some cuts, the more tension you keep, the cleaner you can get it off as well in terms of keeping meat, and the cape separate. Is just making sure you keep good tension.
Yep, exactly. Good tension is perfect.
Yeah, okay.
Yep, you definitely want good tension. And just, as you take the front shoulder off, you take the hind quarter off, you take the back strap off to one side, and then you can roll over, you do the other side, and then you can roll your cape forward as you skin it up the neck, and then you can detach it. I usually leave one or two vertebrae for a measurement. So I'll leave two vertebrae, of the neck, and that's where I'll cut it right there. You cut the meat off there, then you've got it right there, and you can keep it cool. Just get it in the shade, open it up. Don't roll it up because that'll keep the heat in. Lay it out, put it in the shade, keep it cool, let the wind get on it, let it cool down, and then you go from there. You can roll it up, put it in a game bag, do what you need to do from there.
Okay. I guess the process doesn't change, too much if you're doing the gutless method and just deboning meat. You're still making that, going back mid between the legs or behind those rear ribs and then just making that incision all the way on the circumference, if you will, of the body.
Yep, exactly what you're going to do. Yeah, because 90% of the game that we kill, we have to bone out and pack out. Like mine and my father's Wyoming deer last year, we were back in 5 or 6 miles and across the river. So, yeah, we boned both deer out, gutless method, and packed them out. And, we wanted the cakes. They were both real nice bucks that we mounted. So, yep, that's exactly what you do. Same with the gutless method. You just go straight all the way down to the tail and then just ream around.
And what are you doing with this flathead screwdriver?
Okay, now that is when you get back to camp, you got all your meat hanging up, cooling down, and you're waiting for your buddy to kill a deer or something, or you're going to be in camp for a while and you need to get the head out of the skin.
Okay.
Now, where that comes into play is where you take and you cut down from the burr in a V shape from the burr of the antler, and you go down and to that back incision you made, and you make a V or a Y. And then you can take that flathead screwdriver and you ring around the antler burr, because when you cut around the antler burr with a knife, too often, you got to be really good to do it and do it good. Too often people cut a bunch of lines, especially on elk, through that burn to get a good transition in your mount. You don't want a bunch of cuts in that hide there. So you take a screwdriver and you just knock the screwdriver around with the palm of your hand, and you can strip that hide away from the burr there, so you can peel off the rest of the way of the head.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good little
that's
trick.
What the screwdriver's for.
Yeah. So just kind of use it as a little kind of prying mechanism and go around the circumference of the burr, loosening that section there.
That's exactly what you do. You use it as a prying mechanism. So instead of cutting, because like I said, when you cut, a lot of people will cut through, and that's a pretty crucial part of a mount to make it look proper, is around the horn bases. You guys have probably seen mounts where you can see, where it just doesn't look quite right around there. And that's a lot of the time, it's not the taxidermist's fault, but it's the way it was caped, and they're missing a bunch of hide because it was left on the skull and not, on their cape.
So are you using the flathead screwdriver and the knife in conjunction, or just purely just the flathead screwdriver and pushing around that burr?
I just push around the burr with a flathead screwdriver.
Huh, okay.
Yep. In the shop, I use a hammer and a big, 14-inch flathead screwdriver, and I can do one in about 30 seconds. On an elk and a deer, I can do one in about 5 seconds. But, out in the field, I just use my palm, and I have just a tiny little screwdriver. Not a very big one, just a little Harbor Freight, $1.99 one.
Yeah.
Right.
If a guy's on an extended backcountry hunt, maybe in with pack animals, and maybe it's, like you mentioned, maybe he's waiting on his buddy to kill something, and there's going to be several days where there's still going to be the backcountry, and he has his cape. Do you ever recommend guys doing any sort of salting or anything like that if they're going to be out for an extended period of time and maybe have the means to pack something like that in, or should they not worry about it?
Well, if they're going to be there a long time, when I was in Kyrgyzstan, I did that. I prepped my whole cape because I killed my animal on day 3 of a 10-day hunt, and it was in August, so it was getting up to 60 during the day. And so if you educate yourself and you learn how to prep a cape, how to turn ears inside out, turn the eyes, turn the lips, turn the nose, which it's fairly simple. I'm actually going to do a video, a how-to video. I don't know if you guys have seen my how-to videos on YouTube, but I've got a few out. I'm going to do one on this whole process with the first animal that comes in this year. So guys can see how to do it. And get the ears turned, get the eyes turned, the lips turned. As long as you don't have any fat or meat on it, I would highly suggest salting it. Then you don't have to worry about it. Once it's salted, it neutralizes that bacteria, and you're good to go. And that's what I did with my life-size ibex in Kyrgyzstan, because it was getting so warm. I did it.
Yeah. So what about the I mean, we've talked a lot about, caping. We've talked about caring for the inside, getting the flesh off. What about the outside? Do we need to be concerned with trying to clean it, get any blood off of it? Any other considerations on carrying, for the cape and the hair and all that?
Not really, because moisture breeds bacteria. So if you sit there and you wash your cape, it's speeding up that bacteria process, which is going to make your cape slip. So the best thing to do is, you don't want to get excess blood on it. You don't want to get excess dirt and burrs and pine needles in it. Try to keep it as clean as possible while you're caping it. But then just leave it like that, and your taxidermist can take it and he can clean it from there.
Okay, good deal.
Yeah, that's the best thing. And, lay out the cape, like I said, let it cool down real good. And then you don't want the skin to dry out, though. So once it gets pretty cooled down, you fold the skin on top of the skin, then keep it in the shade. You could roll it up, put it in a game bag, and then just pull it out every, few hours, lay it out. If you're going to be in camp for, say 5 or 6 days, if you're coming out, just put it in your, in your game bag and come on out, and then get it to your taxidermist as soon as possible, or get it into a freezer as soon as possible.
Okay. I was going to ask on actually packing it out. I know you mentioned a game bag, but I think it's good you mentioned there skin on skin, and then just try and roll it from there. That's the best way to get it packed up without, contaminating anything.
Yep, exactly. Like I said, make sure you get it cooled down first. So put it in the shade, let the breeze blow on it, because as you know, when you've skinned an animal that you've just harvested, the skin's warm, the meat's warm. Just like the meat you want to cool down, you want to cool the hide down too, and then fold the hide up and then roll it up. Because if you roll it up before, it's going to keep the heat in and it'll cause the bacteria to grow. The two worst things for cape and having them slip is heat and moisture causing bacteria.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like it's a lot.
Keep it cool. Yep.
Keep it cool. Keep it dry. It sounds like it's caring for me. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. It's the exact same thing, guys. They think it's different, but it's not. The exact same thing. Keep it just like the meat, cool and dry.
Perfect.
So, how long can you keep a cape before you've got to bring it in?
Like up in the mountains, you mean, or like in the freezer, or?
Yeah, I guess before you get it in the freezer, say you've got to drive across a couple of states and you've got to spend a few days packing it out and maybe kill it early. Kind of like, what's that kind of cutoff time where you're like, I have to get out of here and get this in a freezer? Assuming it's September.
Okay, so you're talking September. It's getting, in the high 30s at night and then up into the 70s, 80s, during the day, or, 60s, 70s in the day.
Yep.
It's hard to tell, an exact time, but I just say as soon as possible. You don't want to be up in the mountains 4 or 5 days without it being salted for sure in September. November, things are going to freeze solid. It can last a month, but in September, you're just not going to have that. You want to, as soon as possible, and say you got to drive 2 or 3 states away before you get to your taxidermist. I would just say put it in a cooler in a plastic bag. Don't let the moisture get into the bag. You know what I mean? Don't ever put your animal in a plastic bag, though, because that sweats the animal, makes it slip, unless you are putting it on ice or putting it in a freezer.
Okay.
So never, when you're up in camp, throw it in a plastic bag. That'll ruin it faster than anything in the world. But say you're 2 days in camp, you should be fine. You've kept it cool. You get back to the truck, get to town as soon as possible, get ice, get a garbage bag, double bag your cape, throw it in the cooler with the ice all the way around it to keep it cool, and then you can head home.
Okay, great.
Any other things that we didn't mention that you see as mistakes being made in the field by hunters?
I mean, we did. I'll just, go over it again. Leaving way too much meat on the cape and getting it wet or dirty. Those are, the main things. Like I said, when you have too much meat on the cape, it makes a heat barrier and you get slip spots in your cape because of it. And then, of course, you don't want to roll it in a mud hole, which I've had plenty of capes come in that are just as chocolate brown from a bowl, running in a wallow on the inside as they were on the outside. And that's never a good thing.
This episode of the Hunt Backcountry podcast is brought to you by our friends at Easton Archery. One thing that matters so much to me with bow hunting is just having confidence. I not only need confidence in my skills and my abilities, but I need the utmost confidence in every bit of gear that I use. For me, Easton arrows give me that confidence. Personally, I shoot the 4mm FMJ injections, which are a skinny, hard-hitting shaft that fly well in the wind and all types of conditions. But no matter what you're after with your arrows, whether it's for bow hunting a big bull or center punching that X-ring on a target, Easton has something for you. Be sure to check out their full lineup for hunting arrows, target arrows for every price point. Go to eastonhunting.com and check out what they have to offer. So let's get into something that's a little bit specialized, but certainly relevant for some of our audience who are going to be chasing mule deer here real soon, and that's taking care of velvet. So guys chasing velvet bucks, I'd just love to hear all kinds of thoughts on how to take care for that, whether it's, good clean velvet, or whether it's split velvet, guys concerned with stripping velvet. Kind of just walk us through caring for velvet in the field and kind of making some decisions on whether or not to try and retain velvet.
Okay, I am a huge velvet guy. I love velvet. I love working with animals that are in velvet. I love harvesting animals in velvet. The biggest thing with velvet is like a baby. You have got to take care of it twice as well as you do the cape. With velvet, everyone, they want to take that hero shot. They want to grab a hold of that velvet and take the picture. Well, velvet is so temperamental that you're rubbing your hands all over it and you're losing velvet. You're putting heat into the velvet and it makes slip spots in the velvet. Very, very easy. I highly suggest, hold the deer by the neck, by the ears, instead of the horns, if you want to do a mountain velvet. Main thing with velvet is get it in the freezer or get it to a taxidermist as soon as possible, because it's not like a cape where a cape will last a few days. Velvet will not. If you feel comfortable with taking, you can get velvet preserve from the taxidermy companies like Mackenzie, TrueFit, things like that, or you can get formaldehyde. Both are, dangerous to work with. You need to take needles, balls like that, and you can inject your own velvet on the mountain. I've done that before. I don't like the way they look when they've been injected. They shrink up. All mine are freeze-dried that I harvest personally, or that my clients bring in that they have not already injected. I send all mine out to a freeze dryer to keep that mass and keep, it as pristine as possible. But the number one thing with that is you want to get it in a freezer or get it to your taxidermist ASAP, a couple days max, 2 days. Don't put it in the sun. But just like, with your meat, just like with your hide, but the velvet's even more temperamental than any other part of the animal.
Okay. What about a guy who harvests a buck that's maybe in the midst of shedding, or on top of that takes a rough fall and the velvet's getting in rough shape? Clearly, you can do mounts that replicate that and that preserve that, but do you ever just get to the point where you're telling a client, we just need to strip and go hard horn on this?
That's always up to the client. I like the character of the velvet, hanging. I mean, I remember when I was a youth, really young, I shot a buck with my muzzleloader down in Utah, and it still had it was just a little buck, but it still had a little bit of velvet on a couple of the tines, and I saved it all the way home preserved it just because I wanted it. But that's up to the client. Most competent taxidermists can recreate and put like red, like he's just stripping his velvet, so it's got the blood on the horns and everything. If you want that look, or if you want them stripped, they can strip them for you, and they can restain them to make them look like a hard-horn buck. It's just whatever the client wants, or you can have them stripped if it's a complete loss and you really want it in velvet. They can be artificially velveted. It's not cheap at all, but it can be done.
Yeah. So is you kind of mentioned it, is preserving velvet, freeze drying it is the primary method in terms of how it's preserved for longevity of amount?
Personally, in my shop, yes. When I was younger, no one ever did freeze drying. When I was in high school and stuff, everyone injected them with formaldehyde. So that's the way I grew up and started it. And it never gave the right effect. All the blood, everything comes out of the velvet, so it shrinks right to the horn. And you probably noticed when you see some mounts of velvet, they just looked all shriveled, just kind of funny looking. That's why I like the freeze dried method, because it freeze dries the blood and everything inside to keep your mass and keep it as pristine as possible. So I highly suggest freeze drying. If you're going to talk to your taxidermist, ask them if they're going to freeze dry or inject it. I highly suggest freeze drying.
Okay. So if you, say if you're not going to mount your buck for a while, maybe you don't have the money, or can you actually just stick it in the freezer for a year and then take it and get it freeze dried?
Yeah. Stick your antlers in the freezer. Just make sure Mama's not throwing stuff on them and, ripping the velvet and things like that. Get them in the freezer. I would not put, if you still have the cape and everything on the deer, bag the head up real tight, double bag it so the hide doesn't freeze or burn. Okay. And then, you can stick it in. I highly suggest not bagging your horns at all, your antlers. Don't bag the velvet antlers at all. Just put them in the freezer. Before I get to my freeze dryer, I usually wait till I have 5 or 10, because my freeze dryer lives 100 miles away from the shop here. So I'll load my entire freezer up with antlers. I'll have them all caped off, salted, getting ready to go to the tannery, the hides, and then I just lay all the antlers in the freezer, and then I just haul them down to him to have freeze dried when I get a bunch of them.
Okay, great. So Steve and I, we are going on a hunt up in Alaska for caribou on August 21st. So I guess about 50-50 of the caribou up there could be in velvet. So since we can't get them back, because we're doing a drop camp, kill them on the first day, it could be 6 days before we get out and then travel time. Is there anything that we can do to save it in that situation? I've heard that you can poke holes at the bottom and kind of milk it down and get the blood out. Is that an option, or is that not?
My option, if you want to keep the natural velvet on that, artificial velvet on caribou look about the best of any animal. So okay. A lot of guys go that route, but I would get on the internet, get on YouTube, and look up how to inject velvet, and then get on Mackenzie's website or TrueFit website. They're both taxidermy supply companies, and get antler velvet preservative, and I would inject them there if you want to keep your velvet, because it's going to be warm, it's going to be full of bugs, and you should be able to get them injected while you're there. Okay. You'll have time in camp because it's light 20 hours a day.
Right. Okay, but yeah, I guess I haven't looked at caribou that have had the fake velvet on it, but that might be a good point, because I'm sure by the time you get it flown out of your little plane and you fly again on the commercial planes, it's probably not going to look very good.
Yeah, it usually gets beat up pretty bad.
Okay. Perfect.
You had wanted to talk kind of just in general about, a big trip like Alaska and a big rack like caribou, splitting, trying to get things back whole, all those considerations, right?
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if you can talk about that. I mean, last year or 2 years ago, we shot some moose, and that was a complete fiasco trying to figure out how to get them home. So any pointers on that? I guess one, how to do it on a budget, because there's some ways to fly out on pallets or whatnot, and that's really expensive. So, I'd love to hear that.
There's different ways to do it. When I went to Alaska, we just went for Sitka blacktail, and it was over Thanksgiving, so it was freezing cold. What we did is we took and we boned all our meat out, completely boned it out, and then we went to the local just store there on Kodiak Island and bought totes. We froze the meat solid. We put it in the totes with our capes and our horns, and then we taped the totes up, and that's what we used as our carry-on.
Gotcha.
Now, with your antlers, things like that, depends on how big it is. You could, when I went to Kyrgyzstan, I took a huge duffel bag for my carry-on, then I took my rifle case, and I just put my horns and my hide right there in my duffel bag. We couldn't bring the meat, out of Kyrgyzstan. We actually ate my ibex. Literally in 10 days, we ate an entire ibex. So,
wow.
But yeah, we ate ibex 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and nothing else. That's all we had.
Wow.
Yeah, it was kind of rough, but it's part of life. Yeah. So I would, with say you're going caribou hunting, I would take and carry as much on as you can with you. Wrap the cape up. You're going to probably stay in a motel, before you fly out. Mm-hmm. Or hopefully have someone that can freeze it for you, freeze your cape. You're going to have to cut your horns in half. So that's one thing. If it's going to be, say, a Boone and Crockett or Pope and Young caribou, you can't cut them in half. So you're going to probably have to have those shipped home if you want to get it put in the record book. Mm-hmm. If you're not worried about record book, I would split them in half. You know what I mean?
And when you do that, when you split them in half, can you kind of go through that? Because I've heard you kind of want to do it like a jigsaw puzzle, sort of. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. What I would do is, you cut your horns, right in front of the burr, and then from the back of the skull to where you cut in front of the burr, to remove it from the skull. Mm-hmm. And then I would just do it in kind of a V pattern is what I do. So I'll just start, kind of above one of the orbital sockets, the eye sockets, and cut kind of towards the other one, and then go from the back on the same side and go, so you just make a V. Okay. That's how I do it.
And that just helps them go together better when you're mounting them. Is that kind of what that does?
Exactly. Yep. It makes the taxidermist life much easier.
Okay.
Awesome. I'm curious. I know this is kind of an interesting question to ask from your perspective, but I'd just love to hear some tips on what hunters might look for, some of the questions they might ask when they are considering choosing a taxidermist. I mean, just little things like you mentioned, if it's a velvet buck, ask if they're freeze drying. That's good, like, quote unquote, insider information to know if, our hunters out there aren't informed on how these processes are done by a taxidermist. What are some other things that stand out to you and maybe questions to ask if a hunter is evaluating different taxidermists?
Number one thing, ask to look at their work. You want to look at their work. You know what I mean? First and foremost, you want to look at lots of pictures of their work and things they have done. Ask if they detail out the interior of the nose. Ask about eye detail. Ask them if they know things like what a nictitating membrane is, in the eyes, septums in the noses. These certain, little things that taxidermists put in, higher end artists put in their mounts that a lot of guys do not do. Because if they're taking the time to do that, then they're taking the time to make sure the rest of the mount is properly done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And some of that detail stuff can be harder to see in photos, obviously, unless, there's specific photos trying to show those details.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. And then just, select a taxidermist. We decided to go with you, Casey. Congratulations. What are the best ways to sort of communicate the process, communicate the vision, whether that's selecting forms and structures, whether that's, selecting a certain, just appearance factors. I mean, what really is the best way for us as hunters to communicate with you, the taxidermist, about what's possible and make sure that, this vision in our head of what we want is going to come about from you because we're able to communicate well?
Yes, understand that. What I always tell my clients, the sky's the limit. All I'm working with is foam. I can take a chainsaw or a sawzall, anything. I can turn, a form into anything you want. So the great thing is live reference pictures. Look at live pictures of deer, of caribou, of bear, whatever you're getting done, and say, okay, I want it like this live deer looks. What can we do to do it this way? The sky's the limit with taxidermy. It's an art form. It doesn't have to be just a shoulder mount on the wall, left turn, right turn, or straight. We can do anything you want. Most, capable taxidermists can do anything you want. You just, the way you communicate, just kind of tell them what you want, have them draw you up a sketch, or, show you pictures of other mounts they've done that kind of resemble what you want, or like I said, get live reference pictures of live animals the way you want it done, and they can take care of it from there.
So
I really, sorry, go on.
No, go ahead. I'll let you finish.
Okay. I really enjoy having involved clients. I like to, if a client wants his ears a certain way, I'll send them pictures of them in 3 or 4 different positions. Ears on, a mule deer, because the ears are so big, there's a million different ways you can put the ears. In some ways, they just don't look good with a set of antlers. So I'll send 4 or 5 pictures to a client that's particularly wants his ears a certain way, but he's not for sure that's exactly how he wants. So I'll send him in 4 or 5 different poses and say, pick which way you want, and then I can move them right there.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that was definitely one of my questions. I just had my first animal shoulder mounted, and I wasn't sure, is that customization, is that going to cost me extra? It's not like there's it's not like you get a menu. It's kind of like, well, you want a left, right, yeah, I mean, it's about 3 options, and I wasn't sure, how engaged can I get with my taxidermist and say, well, I really want, kind of an alert look, and I want kind of, chin up, and I want, I don't want it too, kind of roided out and, too much muscle, and, but I wasn't, I guess, the guy I worked with, I didn't get through that opportunity. So is that extra, or is that kind of part of your base price? I wasn't sure, where am I overstepping my bounds?
It depends on the taxidermist. Me personally, I have a base price for a shoulder mount. So say you want a shoulder mount with a left turn, but you want to lift his head up a little bit. That's base price. You want to turn his ears a certain way. That's all in the base price. Now, if you want to go to a wall pedestal, that's extra, with habitat, things like that. But, I've got my wall pedestal price. I have my pedestal price. I have my shoulder mount price all lined out. These are my prices. And then this is what it entails. So you want a shoulder mount, and you want the head altered a certain way, different than, just, the left, right, straight. I do that just in my base price.
Okay.
If you don't want so much muscle detail, no problem. I'll put that in the notes. Or you want lots of muscle detail, because I've got guys that they want them to look roided out, and I've got other guys that they don't want them to look roided out at all. And as a taxidermist, I want my client to communicate that to me. I don't want to do something they don't want.
Right. So you should expect to have communication from your taxidermist. So say you go drop it off, you say, all right, I want a, wall pedestal, left turn. And then once he gets to it, whether that's 2 months or 6 months or 12 months, then there should be some more dialogue that kind of takes place between you and the customer, kind of exactly what they want. There's, because for me it was more like, well, okay, I'll come pick it up when it's done. And I was kind of freaking out, like, God, I hope he's doing it right. Because once it's done, it's done. So there should be some expectation of some communication there.
It depends. Every taxidermist is different. The way I run my business is what I do is when you drop the animal off, I take a 30% deposit. When I go to mount your animal, I send you an email that for another 30% down. And then that's when you can call me, you can ask questions, because that's when I finalize the form I'm going to get for you and the alterations I need to do for you. Is that, it's about a week or two before I mount your animal. So I give guys usually 2 weeks. When I send them that second invoice, they call me up, say, all right, this is what I want, and then we can go from there. There's a few guys, not a lot of them. Most guys are pretty, you know what you're doing, just take care of it, after that second phone call, 2 weeks before, just take care of it. Then there's other guys that are real particular. They want a certain look, and I will mount that animal that day, and I will take a picture and say, what do you want changed with the ears, with the eye detail, with the facial detail. But those are guys that, they have 100 mounts in their home, and they've hunted all over the world, and they know a specific look they are looking for.
Right.
So does that answer your question?
Yeah. So obviously it's going to depend on the taxidermist and obviously your level of expectation as well.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
So this is a curveball question, but something I didn't want to forget to address with you, Casey. I've seen guys reference, say it's on a backcountry hunt specifically, and they don't want to pack the cape out because of weight or what have you, but they're planning on getting them out, and they're just assuming that they're going to be able to get a replacement cape after the fact. Do you have many clients do that? Do you see many issues with that? I mean, assuming a guy, I guess, has the money to pay for one, do you see any problems doing that? Or would you always recommend that, if at all possible, a guy brings the original cape with you?
It's always good to have the original cape because that is the animal you harvested. But I probably do 30 or 40 animals with extra capes that I have bought. And so, because they did that, they left the cape on the mountain, or they got rid of the cape and they showed it to all their buddies, and all their buddies says, you're crazy, you need to get that mounted, and then they bring it to the taxidermy shop. So I've always got extra capes on hand for antelope, deer, elk. I mean, I've lots of different African skins I've got on hand. But the big thing, if that's what you're going to do, you decide, I'm going to leave the cape, I'm 10 miles back in, I've got to pack this on my back. Take lots of pictures of the face. Because every deer's got a different colored forehead, different colored snout. You want to get lots of reference pictures so your taxidermist can match the extra cape to the best he can to your original cape.
Gotcha. Okay. Then how much extra is that normally to purchase a cape for deer or elk?
It depends. Everyone says I'm kind of cheap on this aspect. Capes are readily available, especially for elk and smaller deer. And so I usually charge about $100 extra for a cape because I usually buy them for $100 for an elk cape. Now, deer cape on the small side, I can get deer capes between $50 and $100, and that's what I don't upcharge. A lot of guys do, and it's probably bad business for me not to upcharge, but I don't on a cape. But that, it's usually what I pay for it. But then if you get a big, 24, 25-inch neck mule deer, just a big, massive buck, you can be looking at spending $400 or $500 for a cape.
Oh, wow.
Because they're just hard to find. Yeah, they're mule deer capes that are real big, 24, 25-inch neck, like I'm saying. Yeah, you're paying a premium for them. Antelope capes, there's not a lot of those on the market, so you're paying usually around $200 for those. Where, elk, we have to face it, there's a high fence ranch around every corner, and you can get an elk cape pretty reasonable because there's so many farms out around.
Gotcha.
Do you deal with many out-of-state clients, Casey, or guys shipping capes and that to you? And if so, any suggestions on how they could best do that, whether that's just preparing it for shipment, any certain shipping methods they should use, things like that?
Okay, yes, I do. About 85% of my work comes from out of state. The small little town I live in, our entire county has like 2,900 people, so I hardly get any work from around here. Everything comes pretty much from out of state. And so, if you're from overseas, they're going to ship it to me in a crate, USDA. USDA has to look at it. So say if you're going on a hunt to Africa and you want to use me as a taxidermist, call me before you go. We will send you trophy tags that has all the information, and you just give those to your outfitter as you harvest the animals. They zip tie them to your horns or your antlers and to your hides, and then it's all taken care of from there. Now, say you live in Michigan and you want me to do a whitetail for you or a black bear for you. You need to get the head skinned off, get it rolled up and frozen solid, and then I just have guys ship them to me, priority mail on Monday. As long as they're frozen solid in a box and they're shipped on a Monday, they're always fine. Yeah, but I like I said, I get on the wall right now, I've got like 25 heads on the wall, and I've got mounts going to California, Hawaii. The guys from Hawaii hunted them here in Idaho, but I'm shipping to Hawaii. But I've got, I think there's 7 different states that are getting shipped to, that these mounts were either shipped in or brought to me that were hunted locally.
And then what is the, like a general cost on shipping something like a shoulder mount elk back? Like once you're completed?
You're looking around $500 is what you're looking for an elk, $250 for a deer if you live on the East Coast.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just kind of getting a general idea of what cost that adds on top of your work, of course. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And, like going to Hawaii, I've got 4 life-size bears that need to be shipped to Hawaii. I'd have to look at my schedule, but, those are going to be a premium, going to Hawaii. But,
yeah,
guys that they get a big safari done by me, say from Africa or from New Zealand, I'll a lot of places say they live within 1,000 miles of my shop, and if it's a high enough order, say 6 to 10 animals or more, then I will actually deliver for free.
Are you seeing anything kind of new in the taxidermy world, I guess, what people are or aren't doing that someone might want to think about that's not traditional? As far as how they're being mounted or the look or technique, like this freeze-dried thing. Honestly, I didn't even know about it. And I know a lot of guys mounted stuff. I had no idea.
The industry's evolving and changing every day because it's an art form. And so there's all sorts of things that can be done. Like I always say to clients, the sky's the limit. Whatever you have in mind, I usually can pull off. And if I can't, I'm going to be honest with you and tell you I can't. But like my personal ibex, the whole mount is free floating except by the kneecap. It's jumping off a cliff and it's held just by the kneecap. And I mounted a half-life size tar for a gentleman out of Minnesota, and his is same thing. It's an air mount the same way. The sky's the limit with taxidermy. Don't think that you just need a left, right, or straight, or you don't. You only need a shoulder mount. I mean, there's all sorts of things that can be done in the industry now, and every day it's changing, and there's different, more artistic bases that are being built with rock and with habitat or, with nice wood, pedestals, things like that. Anything can be done.
Gotcha.
That's awesome.
Yeah, just the thing is, you've got to find the taxidermist that is willing to do it for you.
Yeah.
Right.
Before we wrap up, Casey, just to cover one more topic, what is your advice on caring for this mount that we've invested in? I mean, I know there's obvious things, but any particular ways that you see guys do not care for mounts well to preserve them for the long term?
Everyone wants to put their mount above the fireplace or above the heater or right next to the window. Heat and change colding destroys a mount. Or say mama wants you to leave it in the garage because she doesn't want the mount. Well, my dad told me a story when I was a kid. He says there's over 2 billion women in the world. You can find one that'll let you put the mount in the house. It's kind of rough, but if you're going to spend that investment, you spent all that money hunting. You spent all that money, to get your trophy. There's 2 huge mistakes guys make. They spend thousands of dollars on the hunt, then they find the cheapest taxidermist they can. Don't find the cheapest taxidermist you can. Find the taxidermist that you like the work the most. It may not be me. It may not be your neighbor. It may be someone 1,000 miles from where you live. But find the taxidermist that is in your price range that you truly can afford and that you like his work the most. And that's who you go with, him or her, because there's many taxidermists that are women. And then when you get that mount home, back to that, don't put it above the fireplace. Don't put it in your garage. Don't put it in a big window for the sun to bleach the hair out. Have the heat and cold, because that cracks ears, cracks around eyes, things like that. And then, I try to every 6 months take my mounts off the wall. I take a Q-tip, put a little bit of Windex on it, clean the eye with Windex. I take and wipe the nose with just a wet rag, and then I take and I wipe the hide down. Don't ever go up the grain of the hair, but go down the grain. And, just get it all dusted off, nice and clean, and then I put them all back up on the wall. I tried to do that at least twice a year.
Awesome. Casey, this has been excellent. It's kind of been a good A to Z overview on everything from what we need before the hunt to what we need during the hunt to how to take care of things after the hunt. So we've covered some great ground and certainly appreciate you joining us to help us do that.
Well, thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah, before we do let you go, where can you point our listeners to learn more about you or check out some of your work?
Okay, there's many different ways to look me up. I'm all over social media. The main one would probably be my Instagram page, which is wild_river_taxidermy. I'm usually posting mounts at least 2 or 3 days a week on there. I've got my website also, which is wildrivertaxidermy.org. You can follow me. I've got Wild River Taxidermy on Facebook and Casey Higley on Facebook also. If you want to check out like my hunts, things like that, they're on my Facebook page, under Casey Higley. Just friend request me. You can see all my crazy activities for all my hunts. But for all my work, main thing, Instagram, just Wild River Taxidermy there on Instagram, because it's always getting updated. I posted a video today with a mount that I just finished up that's got habitat. There's always something going on the Facebook or the Instagram page.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Casey.